If you follow anything China-related, you've inevitably heard of the reference to the Century of Humiliation. Now, based on the name, Century of Humiliation, we can pretty easily infer that some pretty humiliating things must have happened to China over a period of roughly a century. As far as the specifics of what actually happened, far fewer people are aware of this story. So in this video, I'm going to give you a concise overview of China's oft-mentioned Century of Humiliation and also describe how the ramifications of it are being manifested before our very eyes today. All I ask in return for my efforts in making this video is that you please click the like button so that the algorithm will help expose this video to a wider audience. Thanks in advance. The Century of Humiliation, spanning roughly from the mid-19th century to the mid-20th century, is a pivotal period in Chinese history marked by foreign domination, internal strife, and a profound sense of national loss. This era, which began with the First Opium War in 1839 and ended around 1949 with the establishment of the PRC, the People's Republic of China, shaped China's modern identity, its distrust of foreign powers, and its drive for self-reliance and global influence. The roots of the Century of Humiliation lie in the decline of the Qing dynasty and the aggressive expansion of Western imperial powers. By the 19th century, the Qing government was weakened by corruption, overpopulation, and internal rebellions like the Taiping Rebellion, which lasted from around 1850 to 1864, which was a massive civil war in China led by Hong Xiuquan, a failed scholar who experienced visions claiming he was Jesus Christ's younger brother. He then founded a quasi-Christian movement that sought to establish the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. This slightly crazy-sounding fiasco resulted in the deaths of tens of millions. Let me repeat that. The Taiping Rebellion resulted in the deaths of tens of millions. Meanwhile, European powers, particularly Britain, sought to open China's markets. The First Opium War, which lasted from around 1839 to 1842, erupted when Britain, frustrated by China's restrictions on opium trade, used military force to impose its will. That laid the groundwork for the resulting Treaty of Nanjing, which was a major turning point, forcing China to give up Hong Kong, open 5 ports to foreign trade, and grant extraterritorial rights to foreigners. This unequal treaty system became a hallmark of the era, as other powers like France, Germany, Russia, and later Japan, one after the next, all following suit in somewhat similar ways, taking what they wanted and adding on to the humiliating exploitation. Subsequent decades saw further humiliation for China. The Second Opium War from 1856 to 1860 led to more territorial and economic losses, including the legalization of the opium trade and the looting of the Old Summer Palace in Beijing. The Sino-Japanese War, which lasted from 1894 until 1895, was a particularly damaging blow to China. It was in this battle that Japan made light work of China and seized Taiwan as well as the Liaodong Peninsula in the north with the finalizing of the Treaty of Shimonoseki that marked an end to the war. Hey guys, quick interruption. If you are here watching my video, there's a high likelihood that you have an interest in China. Well, personally, I think it's important that we all learn a foreign language, and I want to suggest choosing Chinese as your foreign language. First of all, by studying the Chinese language, you will really start to understand China on a much deeper level. Also, Chinese is the second most widely spoken language in the world, with over 1 billion Chinese speakers worldwide. People say that learning Chinese is so difficult, and let's be frank, in some ways it is, but it's not nearly as tough as you think, and the grammar is super easy. I want to encourage you to check out my channel sponsor, Excel Mandarin, and take advantage of their free trial lesson offer. You have nothing to lose and potentially a lot to gain. Excel Mandarin has bilingual native Chinese speakers based in the US who can teach you real Chinese, and they have the ability to take you from beginner all the way up to fluency. They offer 24/7 support, and they have all of the resources available that you could ever want. I learned Chinese by fumbling my way around on the streets of China. It was a really fun and interesting way to learn, but it wasn't very efficient. If I'd had a native speaker guiding me and helping me along the way, I would have learned a lot more, a lot faster. So check them out today, sign up for a free trial lesson, and make sure not to forget the most important part. Be sure to tell them that Mr. Chopsticks sent you. Okay, now back to the video. This devastating defeat really exposed China's vulnerability and sparked a national awakening among intellectuals and reformers. Efforts like the 100 Days Reform in 1898 aimed to modernize China's political, educational, and economic systems to counter internal decline and foreign domination, but was stifled by the existing powers that be within the Qing dynasty establishment. And then, as if that weren't enough, from 1899 to 1901, there was the Boxer Rebellion. You've probably heard of it. It was a largely anti-Christian peasant uprising which aimed to rid China of foreign influence. This effort was actually supported briefly by the Qing dynasty, but ended in disaster when an 8-nation alliance, that's Japan, Russia, Britain, France, the United States, Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary, crushed the rebellion and forced China to take responsibility for the conflict and imposed heavy financial penalties, which was literally just pouring salt in the wound to an already utterly desperate and humiliated nation. The Qing dynasty collapsed in 1911, and the Republic of China took the throne. But the new government struggled with various warlords vying for control of their immediate area, placing personal enrichment and power over national unity. Naturally, internal division increased during this warlord era, hindering modernization efforts and leaving China vulnerable to foreign influence. Foreign powers continued to exploit China, and Japan in particular was taking full advantage of the opportunity by issuing their 21 demands in 1915. It was through this in which they significantly increased their influence and power over China. And then in 1919, there was the Treaty of Versailles, which transferred German concessions in Shandong province over to Japan, which poured gasoline on already skyrocketing levels of Chinese nationalism and resulted in what is known as the May 4th movement. In a nutshell, thousands of pissed-off students gathered in Tiananmen Square in Beijing to protest the Treaty of Versailles. This movement quickly became bigger and expanded into a broader push for modernization, nationalism, and cultural reform. This movement galvanized and harnessed Chinese nationalism and inspired the growth of political movements such as one that you may have heard of. You know, the Chinese Communist Party. Ever heard of that? The Century of Humiliation reached its most painful point during Japan's invasion in the 1930s and 1940s. The Second Sino-Japanese War brought about pain and suffering which is still at the forefront of the minds of most Chinese even today, whereas it's referenced and discussed daily in mainland China. Through the Manchurian Incident, which was a false flag attack that Japan used to justify their invasion of northeastern China, which I actually have a video about. I'll put a link to that in the video description below. Well, that led to a period of brutality, suffering, and humiliation that still serves as a motivating factor for China's inexorable rise today. Japan actually established an artificial country in the northeast of China called Manchukuo. I have videos on my channel exploring the remnants of that time. Many of the buildings built by the Japanese are still standing, and many of them are even still in use today. Of course, they've been repurposed, but they are still standing in their original form, and I have explored a lot of those areas, seen the facilities firsthand, and made videos about it. I'll also put some links to those videos down below. The brutality and killing was widespread, but it was events like the Nanjing Massacre and the horrific, sadistic human experimentation done at Unit 731 in Harbin City that really pushed China over the edge. The actions of Japan at that time truly woke the dragon and fueled the fire that it breathes today. The hostilities between China and Japan took place in the midst of ongoing battles between the communists and nationalists in China. Hostilities on top of hostilities. The Second Sino-Japanese War ended with the end of World War II in 1945. 4 years later, The communists seized the opportunity to defeat the nationalists who were already severely weakened after fighting the majority of the battles against the Japanese in China. This marked the end of the Chinese Civil War and the beginning of the China that we know today. The Communist Party of China took the throne in 1949 under the leadership of Mao Zedong, or Chairman Mao, as he is often referred to. So, there you go. A lot of things happened over the Century of Humiliation, and they were indeed very humiliating. I think we can all agree on that. This Century of Humiliation left a lasting imprint on China's psyche. It's there, and trust me, it's not dissipating with time. If anything, it seems to be strengthening, as China nowadays is releasing more movies on the atrocities committed by the Japanese against the Chinese in the Second World War, which keeps the memories alive and the wounds raw. This also helps to further unite the nation in a nationalist fervor. They are also ramping up nationalist sentiment through popular media, the school system, and public pressure. Just over my 12 years in China, I have seen a significant increase in this aspect. Nowadays in China, even something like making a positive post on social media about any Western nation, especially the US, will generally result in a strong backlash from their fellow Chinese. Showing too much fondness of anything foreign is strongly frowned upon in China, and they even have sayings for such situations. 崇洋媚外, which translates into English as worshiping foreigners, is a phrase that has had a very strong resurgence in recent years. Chinese fear having that being said against them. It kind of hits them in the soft spot. It's a sensitive point for them, and it's a surprisingly powerful motivator to keep their appreciation for anything foreign in check. Kids as young as 5 or 6 years old will tell you how much they despise the Japanese. China has vowed never again will they face even an ounce of such bullying and humiliation at the hands of foreign forces. The Century of Humiliation's impact on present-day China cannot be underestimated. It was the impetus for their development. It is the fire which fuels their intense nationalism. It gave them a chip on their shoulder. It also gave them a victim card based on undeniable historical facts of wrongdoing against them that they can play anytime. Why are we this way now? Why are we doing this now? Why are we so sensitive to certain things? Why are we so easily offended? Well, look no further than the Century of Humiliation. The situation that hurt them so deeply in the past nowadays actually works greatly to their advantage. In a series of cause and effect, the link between China now and the events during the Century of Humiliation is as clear as day. It woke the dragon, for better or for worse. I want to give an extra special thanks to all of my YouTube members and Patreon supporters for their help in keeping this channel financially sustainable. A huge thank you to all supporters from the $1 tier on up through the higher tiers. I want to give an extra special acknowledgement to my PCO tier members. And lastly, a huge shout out to my top tier supporters. Lee, Martin S., David is Da Wei, and 有爱心的外国人. Oh, and just so you know, you guys rock.
What do you look for beyond the sea, grasshopper?